Hey, my name is Marcus. I'm 32 years old, and I live in a rented house on the south end of Delwood, Vermont, a small city that sits between the mountains and the interstate, close enough to Burlington that people drive up for the weekend and far enough that nobody confuses it for Burlington. The main street has a bookshop that has been there for 40 years, a diner that has been there for 60, and a hardware store that burned down in 2019 and came back the following year in a smaller building, which most people in Delwood took as a kind of statement about character. I restore furniture. Not antiques, exactly, though I do those too when they come in. Mostly I take things people have stopped believing in and make them worth believing in again. A dining table that has been in a garage for 12 years. A rocking chair with 2 broken spindles and a seat that gave out. A chest of drawers someone's grandmother left that smells like cedar and old paper and has a drawer that hasn't opened since 1987. I work out of a converted barn behind my rental, which the landlord calls a workshop in the lease, and which I have spent 4 years making actually worthy of that word. I have a belt sander, a lathe, a collection of planes that I oil myself, and enough clamps to embarrass a person who counts their clamps in public. The smell in that barn, oil and sawdust and the mineral smell of old wood coming back to itself, is the smell I associate with things being right. My days are long and quiet. I'm in the workshop by 7, usually, sometimes earlier if a piece is giving me trouble and I want the early light through the east window to see the grain properly. I break for lunch at noon, always, because I have learned that skipping lunch makes me careless, and careless in a workshop with sharp tools is a medical event. I work until the light goes bad in winter, longer in summer when the evenings last. I eat late, shower, and read until I'm tired. I am not a person who needs a lot from a day to feel okay about it. I need to do the work and do it well, and I need the thing I hand back to someone to be better than the thing they gave me. That is genuinely enough. The one thing I would change, if I was honest, is that I spend most of the time talking to the wood. I don't mean that in a strange way. I mean that the conversations in my life happen mostly with materials, with what a piece is telling me about how it wants to be handled, what it needs, where it has been abused, and where it has been loved, and where it just needs patience and the right grit. I am good at that kind of listening. I am less practiced at the kind that happens with people who can answer back. My mother would say this is because I give too much before I get started. She said it to me once, at Thanksgiving. In the specific way she says things she has been saving up, plainly, without accusation, like she is just filing a report. She said, "Marcus, you'd give a stranger your coat in a snowstorm and then catch a cold and not tell anyone." I said that was an exaggeration. She gave me the look she gives when she does not think it is an exaggeration. I'm not sure she was wrong. I have always been quicker to give than to receive, which sounds like a virtue and is probably one of those things that sounds like a virtue from the outside and feels from the inside, like a way of not having to ask anyone for anything. If you give first, nobody gets the chance to decide whether you're worth it. That Tuesday in February, the late bus from Burlington was the only option. I'd driven up for a restoration supply run, specific hide glue, some brass hardware I couldn't get locally, a length of quarter-sawn white oak from a mill that only sold in person, and the drive back had turned into a problem when the truck decided that the fuel pump had been patient long enough. I got it towed to a shop, arranged to pick it up Thursday, and took the bus because the alternative was a $60 cab, and the bus was $4 and left in 20 minutes. The Burlington to Delwood line runs once in the evening. Not a commuter bus, the kind that covers a route nobody planned exactly, but that serves the gaps between things. It picks up in Burlington proper and threads south through 4 towns before Delwood, and by the time it gets to the stop I boarded from, the evening crowd had already filled it to the kind of fullness where you are calculating the remaining seats before you get on. I counted as I boarded. 1 seat left, window seat, 3 rows back, aisle blocked by a woman with a stroller who had settled in and made clear, in the way that people with strollers on buses make clear, that she was not moving. The seat was free, technically free, reachable if I asked her to shift the stroller, which I was about to. Someone else boarded behind me. I felt her before I heard her, the presence of someone who had arrived at the last possible second, slightly out of breath, with the particular energy of a person who has been moving fast for a reason and has just stopped. I stepped to the side to let her past. She moved around me toward the seat and then stopped when she saw the stroller situation, recalibrating. I looked at her. I looked at the seat. She had a large bag on one shoulder that was clearly heavy, and she was wearing a coat that was not warm enough for February in Vermont, and she had a look on her face that I recognized, not distress exactly, but the look of someone who has used up all of their tolerance for difficulty today, and this bus being full is the thing that is going to tip the remaining amount over. She was looking at the stroller woman with an expression of polite, exhausted patience. I had supplies I could stack. I had the ability to stand. "Take it," I said. She looked at me. Dark eyes, dark hair, a few strands of it across her face from the cold. She looked at the seat. She looked back at me. "You were here first." "I've got things to hold," I said. "I'd rather stand." She looked at me for another second, the kind of look that is deciding whether the offer is genuine or whether there is something attached to it. Then she sat down. She settled the bag on her lap and pulled her coat tighter and looked straight ahead. I stood in the aisle. I held my bag of supplies and the length of oak wrapped in paper, which was awkward and made me moderately concerned for the other passengers, and the bus pulled out into the dark Vermont February, and I looked out the window over the stroller woman's head and thought about the fuel pump. We were 15 minutes out of Burlington when the woman, the one in the seat, said, quietly, "I'm sorry. That was rude of me." I looked down. She was looking up at me, still straight-backed, still holding her bag on her lap. "What was?" I said. "I just sat down. I didn't say thank you." "You don't have to say thank you," I said. I offered. "Still," she said. "Thank you. You're welcome." She looked forward again. The bus moved through the first town, Merrill's Crossing. 6 minutes, nobody getting on. I shifted the oak to my other arm. "That looks heavy," she said, without looking up. "It's fine. Is it furniture?" "Wood for furniture," I said. "Not the same thing yet." She looked up again. "You make furniture?" "Restore it," I said. "Mostly old pieces, things that need work." She held her bag a little tighter. "Do you like it?" It was an odd question for a bus. Not bad, just specific in a way that bus conversation usually isn't. "Yeah," I said. "I like that there's usually a version of the thing that's better underneath. You just have to get to it." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, very quietly, to herself more than to me, "I wish people worked that way." I didn't say anything. The bus moved through a long dark stretch between towns, fields on both sides. The light from the window, the only light in that direction. "I'm sorry," she said. I'm just. It's been a long day." "It's fine," I said. "I'm not usually cryptic on public transportation," she said. "You weren't cryptic," I said. "You said something true." She looked up at me again. There was something in her expression that I hadn't seen there before, something less guarded. She was reassessing, the way you reassess when a stranger says something that lands differently than you expected. "My name's Maya," she said. "Marcus. Are you going to Delwood?" "I live there," I said. She looked out the window at the dark fields. "I don't know where I'm going," she said. I got on this bus because it was the first one leaving. I waited. I've been in Burlington for 3 years, she said. I had an apartment, a job. She stopped. I had a life that I had built very carefully to look exactly the way a good life is supposed to look. She held her bag. And this afternoon I looked at it and I thought, this is not mine. I don't know when it stopped being mine. But it isn't. I looked at the back of the seat in front of me. I thought about furniture that has been painted over so many times you can't see what's underneath, where you have to strip everything back before you can know what you're actually working with. What happened this afternoon? I said. She exhaled. My boyfriend. We were supposed to sign a lease together on an apartment we had been looking at for 2 months. She looked at her hands. I was standing in the leasing office with a pen in my hand, and I looked at the line on the paper and I couldn't. I put the pen down. I walked out. I picked up this bag from a coffee shop where I'd left it that morning, and I got on a bus. She paused. He's been calling. I turned the phone off. How long were you together? I said. 4 years, she said. He's a good person. He didn't do anything wrong. She said it like she had already had to explain this to herself several times. He didn't do anything wrong, and I walked out of a leasing office on a Tuesday afternoon, and now I'm on a bus to somewhere I'm not going. Delwood's all right, I said. She looked up at me. The expression on her face was doing something complicated, halfway between wanting to laugh and not having any laughs left. I don't know anyone in Delwood. You know me, I said. Approximately, she looked at me for a long moment. I was holding a length of white oak and a bag of hide glue and brass hardware, standing in the aisle of a regional bus in February, which is not the context in which most people make offers that mean anything. But I meant it, whatever it was I was offering, which was, I think, just the simple fact of a person who was not going to demand an explanation or a reason or a timeline for recovery. Just a stop she could get off at. What's in Delwood? She said. A bookshop that's been there 40 years, I said. A diner that's been there 60. A workshop that smells like sawdust. I paused. And I know a place that does soup late. She was quiet for a moment. The bus moved through another dark stretch, the mountains starting to show against the sky on the left side now, the kind of dark shape that you only notice when you are already looking. Get off at my stop, she said, very quietly, not a question exactly, more like something she was saying to herself to see if it sounded right. Then she looked up at me, and something about her face had shifted. Less held, less defended, like a piece that has been clamped too long, and the pressure has finally been released. Please, okay, I said. She nodded once, like we had agreed to something, and looked back out the window. I almost didn't say it. That is the truth. When she first got on the bus and took the seat and looked straight ahead, I had already categorized the exchange. A small kindness. The kind I do automatically. A seat given and a thank you received, and then nothing more, because nothing more was mine to offer. I was good at that kind of giving. The kind with a clean edge. The kind where I gave and then stepped back so nobody had to think about whether to give something back. But she had said I wish people worked that way, like something underneath, and I had heard it land before I could decide not to. And that was the thing. That was the whole of it. You cannot unhear something that reaches you before you've got your defenses sorted. We got off at Delwood. The bus stop is on the main street, half a block from the bookshop, and at 9:15 on a February Tuesday, the street was quiet in the way that small Vermont cities are quiet in February, not abandoned, just settled, the lights of the diner 2 blocks down visible and warm, and already the most important lights on the street. She stood on the sidewalk with her bag and looked at the town. She was a city person, I could see that. But she was looking at Delwood the way you look at something you did not expect to find restful. The cold was serious and she was not dressed for it, and neither of us said anything for a moment. "The diner?" I said. "The diner," she said. Her name was Maya Reyes, I learned over soup. She was 30 years old and had grown up in Providence, Rhode Island, and had moved to Burlington for a job at an architecture firm. She was a junior architect, which explained why she looked at buildings differently from how most people look at buildings. I noticed her taking stock of the diner's ceiling when we walked in. A quick visual inventory that she did without being aware of it. She had been good at her job and good at the relationship and good at the apartment search, and she had looked at a lease line on a Tuesday afternoon and understood suddenly, in the way you understand things when your body decides before your brain catches up, that she had spent 4 years building a life that fit someone else's measurements. "I don't mean he made me," she said carefully. "He didn't. I chose all of it. I'm good at figuring out what something needs and giving it that." She looked at her soup I just got, confused about whose needs I was tracking. "Yeah," I said. You're not supposed to just say yeah," she said. "You're supposed to say that sounds hard or something." "It does sound hard," I said. "But yeah also seemed right." She looked at me. "Do you do that to everyone? Just agree with the worst version of what they're saying?" "I don't think it's the worst version," I said. "I think it's accurate. And accurate is better." She studied me for a moment. "What's your version?" she said. "Of the thing you do when you give everyone your seat." I looked at my coffee. My mother's voice, filed for later use. "You'd give a stranger your coat and then catch a cold and not tell anyone." "I'm good at knowing what something needs," I said. "I just usually aim it outward." I looked at the diner table. It's easier to know what a piece of furniture needs than to know what I need. The furniture holds still. She was quiet for a second. Then, "That is either the saddest or the most honest thing I've heard today. Could be both," I said. "Okay," she said. "Both." She leaned her elbows on the table. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure, why did you say I know you approximately?" she said. "On the bus. You could have just said I know a diner. You didn't have to include yourself." I thought about that. I had not thought about it consciously at the time. It had just come out. The way things come out when you say them before you've decided whether to. I was not in the habit of including myself in offers. Usually I built the offer to stand without me in it. "I don't know," I said. Which was not entirely true. "Maybe because you said you didn't know anyone here, and that seemed like the thing that actually mattered." She looked at me steadily. She had the particular attention of someone who is trained to look at structures and understand how they're holding themselves up, who knows the difference between something that appears solid and something that actually is. I had the feeling, sitting across from her in that diner, that she was reading me the way I read a piece before I start, checking the joints, testing where the grain ran, looking for what had been repaired before and how well. "Marcus," she said. "Yeah, I don't know what I'm doing," she said. "I want to be clear about that. I got off a bus in a town I don't know with a person I met 40 minutes ago, and I don't have a plan past tonight." "That's fine," I said. "Is it?" "You can figure out the rest of it tomorrow," I said. "Tonight you just needed somewhere to stop." She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "You're very calm about this." "I work with things that have been broken for years," I said. "I've learned that the first night in the shop, all you do is look. You don't touch anything. You just look at what you're working with and let the piece tell you what it needs." I paused. "You don't have to know what comes next tonight." She held her soup bowl in both hands, warming them. Outside the diner window, the main street was quiet, the bookshop dark, a single car going slowly past, the mountains invisible now in the dark but present. The way things are present when you know they're there. "My sister's in Montpellier," she said. "That's only an hour from here." "Yeah," I said. "I'll call her tomorrow. When I can say it out loud without it sounding like a disaster." "It doesn't sound like a disaster," I said. "No? It sounds like someone who figured something out before it got worse," I said. "That's not nothing. That's actually the hard part." She looked at me. The expression on her face was something I had not seen there yet. Not the exhausted patience from the bus, not the careful candor of the soup, but something quieter and more real. The look of someone who has been carrying a thing by herself for a long time and has just been handed a moment of not having to. She did not say anything. She looked at her hands. "My mother says I give too much before I get started," I said. "That I give before anyone gets the chance to give back." "Is she right?" "Probably," I said. "But I think it works out sometimes, if the right person's on the other end of it." She looked at me. "The right person," she said. "Yeah. What makes someone the right person?" I looked at the table. I thought about furniture that is worth restoring. Not everything is. Some pieces are too far gone, the wood punky, the joints powder, nothing worth saving under the paint. But you learn to recognize the ones that are. There is a quality in them, even neglected, even buried. A solidity in the grain, a rightness in the proportion, something that tells you this was made well and has just been treated carelessly, and that the care is still findable underneath. "They say something true on a bus," I said, without knowing anyone's listening. She was quiet for a long moment. "I'm going to call my sister tomorrow," she said. "And I'm going to figure out the rest of it." She looked at me. "But tonight? Is there a place I can—" "There's a bed and breakfast 2 blocks from here," I said. "Edna Marsh runs it. She's up until 11. I can walk you." "You don't have to do that." "I know," I said. "I want to." She looked at me, the structural engineer look, the one that checked joints. "Okay," she said. "But only if you let me pay for the soup." "I already paid for the soup." "Marcus, you can get it next time," I said. She looked at me. "Next time," she said. Quiet, testing the weight of it. "There's a hardware store that burned down and came back smaller," I said. "And a bookshop that's been here 40 years. People tend to come back to Delwood once they've found it." She looked out the window at the quiet street. She looked at it the way she had looked at the diner ceiling, the architect's inventory, measuring what was there, what it could hold. Then she looked at me. "Okay," she said. I walked her to Edna's. The cold was serious and her coat was not enough, and she walked with her shoulders up and her hands in her pockets. And we did not say much, just walked the 2 blocks with the sound of our boots on the February sidewalk. Edna was up, as I knew she would be, and she gave Maya a room on the 2nd floor with a window that looked out over the street. And she looked at Maya the way people in small towns look at someone who has arrived from somewhere difficult, with recognition and without questions. I walked home. My workshop was cold when I passed it, the way workshops get when they have not been heated all day, and I stood in the doorway for a moment and looked at the piece on the bench. An oak secretary desk, 19th century, the top hinge sprung and the drop front stuck. I had been putting off the difficult part, which was the drop front, because the mechanism was unusual, and I had not yet understood how it was supposed to work. Sometimes you have to let a piece sit in the shop for a while before it tells you what it needs. I went inside and made tea and sat at my kitchen table and thought about a woman on a bus who had said she wished people worked that way, like there was a better version underneath, if you could just get to it. She called the next morning. Not her sister, me. She had my number because I had written it on the Edna Marsh receipt in case she needed anything in the night, which was the kind of thing I did automatically and had learned not to examine too closely. I called Jess, she said. My sister. She's coming on Friday to help me sort out the practical stuff, the apartment, the things I need to tell people. A pause. I thought I'd have more time in Delwood. You have until Friday, I said. Another pause. I walked past the bookshop this morning, she said. It smelt exactly right. It always does. Marcus, yeah, can I see the workshop? I almost said something about it not being very interesting to someone who didn't know the work. That would have been the old move. The one where I offered something and then immediately made the thing smaller so the other person could decide it was fine to decline. I caught myself. Come at noon, I said. I'll have the doors open. She was there at 5 past, which I had begun to understand was how Maya moved through time, precise, slightly ahead of her own stated schedule, like she was always leaving a margin. She had been to the bookshop and had a paper bag from the diner, and she set it on the workbench without asking whether that was all right, which told me she had already decided the workshop was somewhere she could be without asking for permission. I brought lunch, she said. I didn't know what you ate. What did you get? Soup for me, because it worked last night, she said, and a sandwich. Because you look like someone who eats sandwiches. She was not wrong. What kind? Turkey and something. The woman at the counter just handed it to me and said this is what he gets. She looked at me. Do you eat there a lot? 3 times a week, I said. Edna tells them things. Edna is a hub, she said, with a dry certainty that suggested she had already had 2 conversations with Edna this morning. She looked around the workshop. She did the inventory. She stopped at the secretary desk. We ate in the workshop, sitting on 2 stools I pulled from under the bench. She asked about each piece, not all at once, in a polite overview way, but one at a time, specifically. The way someone asks when they actually want to know. She asked about a Windsor chair with a replaced back rail, whether the wood I'd used was the same species or a match on grain and color. She asked about a Japan tea tray I'd been cleaning, what the lacquer was made of, and how it responded to humidity. She asked about the smell, the specific layered smell of oil and old wood, and the mineral quality of dry dust, and whether I had ever gotten used to it, or whether it was still distinct every morning when I opened the doors. Still distinct, I said. That's how I know nothing's wrong. If the smell changes, something's off. She looked at me. That's a good system, she said. For knowing when something's wrong, it works on furniture, I said. But not people. Not usually, I said. People don't have a smell that changes when something's off. She was quiet for a moment, looking at the tea tray. I think they do, she said. You just have to be paying the right kind of attention. She picked up her soup. I smelt something wrong 2 years ago. I didn't name it. I just kept going, thinking it would correct itself. Why didn't you name it? I said. She held the soup bowl in both hands, warming them the way she had the night before. Because naming it would have meant deciding what to do about it, she said. And I didn't know what to do about it. So I just didn't look directly at it. I thought about pieces that come into the workshop I can tell, within the first 10 minutes, are not going to be what the owner hopes. A surface that looks intact, but flexes wrong. Wood that has been wet for too long and is past the point where oil can help it. I had learned over years to tell people that early, to say, plainly, here is what I see, Here is what it means. Here is what I think we can actually do. It was never the conversation anyone wanted at the start. It was always better than finding out later. Did you know this morning? I said. When you woke up. Before the leasing office. She was quiet for a long moment. I've known since last October, she said. I woke up on a Sunday in October and looked at the ceiling and just knew, and then I went and made coffee and I didn't say anything. She paused, and then there were 4 more months of not saying anything until a Tuesday afternoon when I had a pen in my hand and I couldn't. October to February is a long time to not say something, I said. It is, she said. It felt shorter inside it. She looked at the desk. That's the thing about a racked frame. You don't notice it going out of true, because it happens slowly. And then one day you try to open the drop front, and it won't. I looked at her. I had been thinking something very similar since the night before, and had been deciding whether or not to say it, which was the same tendency I was accusing her of. The drop front won't open, I said, but the piece is still worth restoring. She looked at me steadily. Yeah, she said. I know. We were quiet for a moment, both looking at the desk. I didn't mean the desk, I said. I know that too, she said. The workshop was the thing I almost never showed people. Not because I was secretive about it. It was my work. It was good work. I was not embarrassed by it. But I had built it over 4 years into something that felt like the inside of my head, made physical, and showing it to someone felt like showing them something that was difficult to explain from the outside. I showed her the workshop. She stood in the doorway for a moment, the way I had stood the night before, and she looked at it the way she looked at everything, the architect's inventory, the careful measurement. Then she walked in and looked at the secretary desk on the bench. What happened to it? She said. The drop front is stuck, I said. The mechanism's unusual. I haven't figured it out yet. She looked at it. She looked at the hinge. She looked at the line of the desk. The hinge isn't the problem, she said. Look at the case. She pointed. That side is out of square. Just slightly. The whole desk has racked. The weight shifted over years and pulled the frame. The drop front can't open because the frame is binding it. I looked. I looked at the line she was pointing at. She was right. Completely right. I missed that, I said. You were looking at the symptom, she said, not the structure. I looked at her. Architecture school, she said, with something that was almost a smile. We spend a lot of time learning to look past the surface problem. Yeah, I said. So do I. Usually, she looked at me steadily. Maybe you needed a second set of eyes. We worked on the secretary desk together that morning. She did not know woodworking, she said so plainly, without apology. But she understood structure and load and the geometry of a thing that has been pulled out of true over time. And I understood the materials and the tools and what it was going to take to bring it back. Between us, we got the desk level on the bench and identified the 2 points where the frame had racked, and by noon the drop front opened cleanly for the first time in what I estimated was 30 years. She stood back when it opened and looked at it with an expression I knew well. The specific satisfaction of a thing made right again, the quiet click of something returning to what it was built to be. That's the part you like, she said. It was not a question. That's the part I like, I said. She looked at the desk for another moment. Then she looked at me. I've been looking at the symptom, she said, with the relationship. With Burlington, I keep thinking the problem was the lease, or the apartment, or the specific Tuesday when I walked out. She shook her head. But the frame's been out of square for longer than that. Yeah, I said. How do you fix it? She said. In furniture, when the frame is racked, you find the points that have shifted, I said. You work them back gradually. You don't force it. You can't force it. You'll split the wood. You just bring it back slowly, a little at a time, until the frame is true again and everything else can settle. She nodded slowly. She was looking at the desk, but she was also looking at something else, something internal, something she was working out. Marcus, she said. Yeah. What did you mean last night? She said. Next time, when you said next time. I looked at the bench. At the desk, the drop front open now, the interior fittings revealed, small cubbies, a leather writing surface, the whole interior visible and intact under 30 years of being stuck. I meant what I said, I said. People find Delwood and they come back. That's about the town, she said. It is, I said. She waited. And I meant it about me too, I said. If you want that to be a part of what next time means. She looked at me for a moment. The morning light through the east window of the workshop caught the grain of the oak on the bench and the grain of the floor, and she was standing in it. And she looked like someone who had been inside too long and had just remembered what good light feels like. I want to figure out the rest of it first, she said. The practical things. My sister, the apartment, the people I owe a conversation to. She paused. But yes, I want that to be part of what next time means. Okay, I said. Okay, she said. Jess came on Friday. She was louder than Maya and warmer, and she hugged me when she met me, which I had not seen coming, and she looked around the workshop with the same inventory expression Maya had, but aimed at me rather than the desk, and she said to Maya, while I was pretending to be busy with a plane, "He's good." Maya said, "I know." Jess said, "He's very calm." Maya said, "I know that too." I kept planing. They sorted the practical things over the following 3 weeks, from a distance, with phone calls and 2 trips back to Burlington. I drove her once, in the truck, which the shop had returned on Thursday, with a new fuel pump and an invoice that hurt. We went up on a Saturday morning and packed what she needed from the Burlington apartment, and she was quiet on the drive back, looking at the mountains coming up out of the fog. And I did not push at the quiet, because I had learned by then that her quiet was the thinking kind, and it needed room. By April, her sister had helped her find a sublet in Montpelier, a month-by-month thing while she figured out what came next, and she was talking to an architecture firm there about a junior position. She came to Delwood on Saturdays. She did not always call ahead. The bookshop got to know her by name. Edna Marsh, who was not a person who surprised easily, told me one evening in the diner that Maya had good bones, which was Edna's highest architectural compliment. The secretary desk was returned to its owner in March, restored. The frame true, the drop front opening cleanly. The leather writing surface cleaned and fed with oil and looking the way it must have looked in 1887 when someone built it carefully and with confidence. The owner, a retired librarian in her late 70s who had inherited it from her mother, stood in front of it when I delivered it and touched the drop front with one hand, opened it and closed it, opened it again. She said, "I'd given up on this." "Most things are worth the work," I said. She looked at me. "Do you believe that?" I thought about a bus in February, about a woman who said, "I wish people worked that way." About a drop front that would not open because the frame had been out of square for 30 years and nobody had known how to look at it correctly until someone with the right kind of eyes stood next to it. "Yes," I said. "I believe it." There is a photograph on the shelf in my workshop now, between 2 cans of oil finish. It is from a Saturday in late April. Maya took it, actually, by propping her phone on the bench, which meant neither of us was looking at the camera. We are both looking at a blanket chest I had just finished. A federal period piece with a painted decoration on the front that I had spent 3 weeks carefully revealing beneath 4 later coats of paint. We are standing close. She has her hands in the back pockets of her jeans, and she is looking at the chest the way architects look at something that is exactly right. I am looking at her, looking at it. My mother saw it when she visited in May. She did not say anything about it directly. She just looked at it for a moment, and then looked at me with the expression she uses when she has filed a report and is waiting to see if I am going to acknowledge receiving it. I acknowledged it. She sees the structure, I said, under the surface. Like a second set of eyes. My mother nodded slowly. "And what do you see?" she said. I looked at the photograph, at the chest, the revealed decoration. The careful work of 3 weeks that had produced something nobody had known was there. At Maya standing next to it with her hands in her pockets, looking at it like it was exactly what it was supposed to be. Someone who was worth stopping for, I said. My mother made the sound she makes when she has been right about something for a long time and does not need to say so. I had spent a long time learning to give without waiting to see what came back. I had gotten very good at the clean edge, the gift with no string, the coat off your back and then you're back to the cold and not a word about it. I told myself it was generosity. It was, partly. But it was also a way of never finding out if the thing you offered was worth offering. If you give and turn away, you never have to stand there waiting to see if what you gave was worth anything. Maya had gotten on a bus going somewhere she didn't know and asked a stranger to come with her. And I had gone. Maybe that's what it is. You spend your whole life giving with clean edges, and then one February evening on a bus, you hear someone say something true. And you say okay, and you follow them off at a stop you were going to anyway, and the two of you figure out the rest of it from there. You don't force it. You bring it back slowly, a little at a time, until the frame is true again and everything else can settle. 226